sea vegetables and kelp can be a wonderful source of iodine for the body as well as some other nutrients for the body. The problem is, depending on where these sea vegetables are harvested from, they have the same iodine concentrating symporter that humans have, the sodium iodine symporter. And this symporter becomes disabled or damaged when it's exposed to toxic halides such as bromide and fluoride, and bromide in particular. And so if the seawater is contaminated with bromide, it will take up bromide in place of iodine, similar to our bodies. Now, I've had some samples of kelp examined for their levels of iodine and levels of bromide, and I found about 50% of them have very high levels of bromide. So at this point, I'm not so sure
Wow,
with how polluted our
that
seas
is
are if that's the best way to get iodine in.
well. Thank you for doing that research. That's very forward thinking and really making that time and effort and commitment and investment to do that because that's an amazing piece of information because we typically would it's not surprising when you hear it, but intuitively because the waters are contaminated. It's one of the reasons why I don't recommend fish for most people because of the similar issues. Uh, but this contamination just screws up the normal processes. So it's a totally different food than it was 50 or 100 years ago. And does your analysis allow you to identify any specific brands that were free of this contamination or places where they were grown that might be more likely to be a useful source, or is it just too difficult to break it down?
Well, I haven't tested everything out there, and I've tested only a few brands of this. And the problem was when I started seeing 50% of them have high toxic, not only did they have high bromide levels, they had high mercury levels in them. I just stopped testing at that point, and if I'm going to focus on iodine, I would focus on iodine and use a pure iodine source, and that's where I've left it at that. The other problem with the kelp and the sea vegetables is the longer these vegetables have been out of their source, out of the ocean, the more iodine sublimates off into a gaseous state and leaves the product. So each batch of these products can have different amounts of iodine depending on how long they've been out of the ocean. And again, I like to be a little more precise when I want someone to take something, at least to know what they're taking. But if you can find a pure source of sea vegetables, I think that's a reasonable way to get iodine in the body.
All right, so then, well, thank you for that insight. It's really an unexpected surprise and benefit because I wasn't aware of that. The but for the most part, we've been talking about mineral supplementation so that your body has enough. But that isn't going to directly help your body to detoxify from these toxic exposures. So there are other nutrients that can do that. And even in the sort of the sea vegetable category, we have algae such as spirulina and chlorella, which actually are don't have potentially the same contamination issues because they're cultured products. They're harvested in these pools that there's much finer control over the toxic elements that are introduced into the water. But still, if a radioactive cloud comes over, it's going to integrate that iodine into it. There's no question. So you have to be careful of that. And I'm thinking of recommending, because we do sell chlorella and will be selling spirulina, to have that certified as being radioactive free because they're grown in areas. And you've just got to do that. It's a due diligence. So it's a new step that we have to introduce now because of the contamination worldwide. But I'm wondering if you have comments on detoxifying vegetables and maybe other nutrients that one can use to address these concerns.
Look, I use the same products you use. We use chlorella, we use spirulina in our practice as well. And my concern is as well as yours because where we get our products from is the Northwest, and that's where the radioactivity is going to come from. So I agree. I think we're going to have to demand from the manufacturers to do the appropriate testing and ensure that these products aren't contaminated. And it's a
Well, well,
problem we live in. And
I don't know that it's going to be the manufacturers because they have obviously a conflict of interest. So it really needs to be a third-party independent test to do that. And it's a relatively expensive test, just putting it over a Geiger counter. I don't think most of the farms are in the Pacific, are in the Northwest. They're really grown in China or India or Japan. So really much closer to where this radiation is coming from in this current crisis. So I think it's a real big issue. There's a lot of farms out in Japan, a lot of chlorella farms, and anything harvested prior to since last week is going to be an issue. So I think it's really going to be a major concern. And if you purchase these products, you really want to have that due diligence done.
I
So
agree.
any other nutrients like ashwagandha or some zeolite or bentonite clays that might be useful?
Well, I'm not so sure. Again, I've tested some of these products and found that some of them are contaminated, and you know, I think you need to be careful about what you're using, and if you're, what we generally do in our office is when we start using a new product, we will test it for an analysis to make sure it's heavy metal free or whatever we're looking for, toxicity free, and we're amazed at how many products are contaminated out there. So a lot of these detoxification products that you're mentioning, I'm not so sure they're so clean. Now, I can't guarantee that everyone is or isn't. But really, with what's going on in Japan, I think I agree with you. We all need to do due diligence and to all think about it and to all question these manufacturers. And when I question the manufacturers, the ones who are concerned about it who take the right ethical approach have not balked at sending it to an independent analysis and sending me the results. The ones who don't or who don't answer my phone calls, we stop using their products or I won't order from them.
Well, I think that's a very wise process, and it's actually one that we've adopted for many years in the supplements that we sell, because if you're purchasing raw materials from a vendor, they of course will give you what's called a C of A, a certificate of analysis, but that's their certificate. It's kind of like the drug companies giving the FDA their own studies, so you really need an independent third party to objectively do it from a lab that is reliable and can be trustworthy, and that's what we do with all of our products. So we know that it's not contaminated, and it is what it says it is, and because it's really the due diligence and responsibility of the manufacturer to do that, and because there's a lot of people, a lot of corrupt individuals in the world, and they'll cut corners and sacrifice quality to increase their income, and that's unfortunate, but that's the true reality. That's why these measures have to be implemented. So well, I think that covers most of the issues I wanted to, and I'm really very grateful that you were able to cut yourself away from the conference that you're attending now. And are there any other take-home points or wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
I'd tell the listeners, I don't really think there's a need to panic right now. I think we're far enough away where I agree with you, Dr. Mercola. I don't think there's going to be any acute healthcare crises from this, but I also don't think we can wait on our government to properly advise us, and I think we need to follow the news and follow the information and make our best decisions possible. But I also think, again, this should be a wake-up call. This is why I'm writing my books. This is why I wrote my iodine book. This is why you write your books, why you have your website that we all go to, and why people need to take, their health care into their own hands and to make the right decisions for them. And the right decisions are, number one, eating a better diet and exercise and taking the right supplements. And I think iodine can be a part of most people's regimens and really make a huge difference in how they're feeling and how they achieve their optimal health.
Yeah, the unfortunate challenge of the iodine supplementation recommendation at this point is probably I don't know, I haven't looked, but I would imagine that most of the supplies are going to be running dry or hard, or maybe even some unethical or unscrupulous vendors or suppliers will be raising the price quite dramatically. So most likely it's not going to be an acute issue for you. You don't have to worry about radiation concern. But however, as you mentioned, this is a wake-up call, and you definitely need it. There could be a reactor in your backyard or 30 miles away from you that might blow up tomorrow, and then it becomes a real issue. So you really, each and every one of us, there's only one of 20 you listening to this that have enough iodine. That's not a lot. There's a higher likelihood you have enough vitamin D. So really, it's incumbent upon pretty much everyone to understand that you and your family need to have enough iodine, and for other reasons other than this radioactive cloud that may or may not come to the United States. So I really think it's great, and I thank you for all the work that you've done and helping enlighten us and me and really advancing the science we have, because you've really done some fairly significant work in this analysis. I've practiced for 25 years, and to compile a data set of 5,000 patients on any one test is just really, it's beyond most studies that are published. It really is, and it just, even though you didn't publish your results, it doesn't diminish the value of that and the truth of that information. It's really a very powerful aspect that we can all really benefit from. So I really appreciate you doing that.
I'd like to just point out that, in my lecturing across the country, when I ask physicians who are testing their patients, they're seeing the same results I'm seeing. And it's not just me out there, it's people from the north to the south to the east to the west. And, we're all seeing the same thing, and I think it's a direct relation to the toxic environment we live in.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't really understand the reason for that, but it makes perfect sense when you have exposure to these other toxic halides that it really increases your need, and because of it's displacing that, which is really isn't obvious initially, but once you understand it, it makes sense.
Well,
Well,
thank you for having me, Dr. Mercola.
well, thank you. I really appreciate it.